long. Every Mother's Day and Father's Day, I try to give people an opportunity to hear from someone among you. And speaking of that, on Father's Day, Mr. Tommy Rhodes is going to be speaking to us and sharing his story of faith. So I know you're going to want to come to that. But today we have Dr. Karen Wicks, who is going to be speaking to us. For those of you who don't know Karen, she and her husband Les, who is now passed on to be with Jesus, they began their journey of trying to find a way to minister to children. And they are the founders, and she is still the head of Royal Live Oaks Academy in Hardyville. And she's doing a great work, and she's still going out and impacting kids' lives. She is an author, a celebrated author, has written books. And are you working on one now again? She is working on another book. So she has been a busy woman, and we want to welcome her to come and speak to us today. So, Karen, you come and share with us what God has put on your heart.
I have one tissue. It probably won't be enough, but we have it. I've spoken a lot, but this is a very different kind of speaking. This is about my life. It's quite personal. So I'm very vulnerable. So I'll just say that up front. Because when I think about my life, I mostly think about the blessings. If you ever hear me sing, I talk a lot about blessings. And the scripture that stays with me so often, 2 Corinthians 12:9, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Well, I'm probably the greatest example of someone who has been weak. But God has the ability to restore what has been lost in my life and in many others. I want you to think about a few pictures that I'd like to have in your mind. One is God going down a long hallway and opening doors on each side. Some of them are locked and have been locked for a long time. Others not. But when he goes inside each door, he blesses what's inside. Those are my memories. Some are pretty. Some are very ugly. But all of them have God in them. And another image I'd like you to think about, a frame, a picture frame. Many people see me as I am today, and that's the picture they'd put in that frame. I see a lot of different pictures there. I see a little girl who is sexually abused. I see a little girl who gave her heart to Jesus at 6 years old. Now, my sister Joyce and Rachel are here. My sister Joyce and I were always best friends, and we'd get behind Daddy's big chair, and one of us would preach to the other one, and we'd sing together. And at one of those times, I knew I needed Jesus to come into my heart. And I sang, into my heart, come into my heart, Lord Jesus. And he did. And I knew it. And I remember Daddy baptizing me with a bunch of other people in the river, because my dad was a preacher. Interesting story there. The year I was born, it must have been really propitious or something, because the year I was born, my father became an ordained minister. And he was asked to plant churches in remote areas in West Virginia where we live, about 50 miles from home. And we travel to church a long ways over mountainous roads. We travel so that we could go pick up children to bring them to church. I remember one church, my father and my brother David and a bunch of men from the church built that church. And we started out in a saloon. Remember that? We started out in a saloon because God called my father to go into the highways and the byways and bring the gospel message to them. And he did. And he died at age 65 because he had another job that was a full-time job. So I wonder where I got the workaholic part of me. I'm sure it had something to do with my father. But I was talking about those pictures. So you see, there's a mixture of pictures in there because no matter what happened, both good and bad, God was present. And God was always there with me. And I knew it. I was talking to Pastor about a trapeze artist being in one of those rooms because I see myself like this person who is swinging, and there's the fear of letting go of the hands that are coming to grasp mine. And he reminded me that those are God's hands. And I immediately thought about all of the times that God's hands have been there to grasp mine. I've had a privileged life in many respects, and yet not so much. I mean, we grew up very poor, but we really didn't know it because we were always doing for other people. Our lives were framed by ministry. We were out helping other people. We ministered with our parents. We did everything they did when it came to ministry, whether it was the nursing home ministry or going out to families' homes, going to bring people to church or to go help them with a need. My life really has been framed by ministry. I've always known I had a calling. I didn't know for sure what it was. So in some of those rooms, I thought the calling was to sing in a national group. That wasn't what God wanted for me to do. You know, I had a lot of opportunity to sing and glorify God through music. But I really was confused about getting the question of who I am right. And, you know, because of something that was traumatic when I was a child, when I went off to school and college, I knew what I wanted to be. I wanted to be a teacher. But at the same time, I was very confused about who Karen is. It was a Christian college, Lee College. It's Lee University today in Cleveland, Tennessee. And I had a lot of wonderful experiences there. But I had an ulcer. I don't think I really processed my father's death when I was 16. A lot of pressure. Worked multiple jobs because I did not want to have a college loan. And with our father's death, there was some Social Security benefits to help with that. So, you know, I really thought that I could do everything. Any of you ever thought that? Or is it just me? So, you know, I would overdo everything. If I was supposed to read one chapter, I would read 2. If I was supposed to write, 5 pages, I might do 10. One professor told me I was the encyclopedic learner. If I was supposed to read about this author, I wanted to read as many things about that author as possible. So to make a long story short, I majored in English and French and minored in religion and music. Because, you know, I was going to do everything. That was me. But I was going to be a teacher. And I just assumed that being a teacher would just take me wherever I needed to go. Well, some of those rooms that I was talking about have other things going on in them. Between college and graduate school, because my major professor really thought I should go on and get a master's degree. He really showed a lot of belief in me. I can't say I believed in myself all that much, but so I was going to go to graduate school. And I had the opportunity to go to Paris for the summer and study at the Sorbonne and stay in a little pension, which is like a boarding house. And no one was speaking English, so, I became fluent pretty quickly. But I was talking to the Sunday school class about temptations and how some things can seem really very innocent on the surface, and yet they're not. So in the process of going where I shouldn't have gone, I ended up being kidnapped. And some really bad things happened to me, as you can imagine. And it took a while before I did not think, well, my life is over. I mean, what am I going to do now? Nobody's going to want me. Oh, I've got to be pregnant. I mean, my goodness, that's what happens, right? But then God spoke. You don't have to stay here. I figured out a way to escape, and that was not an easy thing, but I did. Well, what do you do then? My sister Rachel met me when I came home on the plane. Rachel is a licensed professional counselor. I needed one. I really did. What was I going to tell my mother? My mother, who always believed in me. Always. That room was not such a nice room, was it? But you know what? That did not define me. Bad things do not define us unless we let them. God had a calling on my life. I was going to be a teacher, and I was going to sing, and I was going to glorify him. Isn't that what I'm supposed to do? It doesn't matter how I feel. It matters what I do about it. And, well, you know what? You go into graduate school and you find out, oh my word, they didn't prepare me for this. Well, there was no doing more than was expected. I could barely keep up. You had to read like practically a whole book a night and then be able to talk about it the next day. Yes, well, and University of Tennessee had a lot of things going for it, but I have to say, some of their professors didn't know how to keep their hands where they belonged. That was a bit difficult. And I was so naive about so many things. But that was not going to define me either. I was not going to let that happen to me. I had to get some help for that one. It was a very difficult road those years I was getting my master's. And I was working. I was what's called a TA, which is teaching assistant. And in the process of being a teaching assistant, one of the students who was an adjunct professor in physics, he and I started a relationship. Now, when you don't really know who you are, and you don't really think so much of yourself, you can go down a road you don't really want to go. That's a room that you don't want to be in. But you know what? God can still be with you. God can still try to get your attention and tell you where you need to go. Because I knew I had a calling. I knew I was going to be a teacher. And I knew I had a mother whose belief in me was greater than anything. Unconditional love. My father, it wasn't so much unconditional, or at least it didn't feel like that. He was a perfectionist. So am I. And so never being enough can do something to you that doesn't make your road the easiest one, and you can go into rooms that you never belong in. And yet, there is God. There is always God. I went on to get my doctorate at New York University, and my mother didn't want me to move to New York because she said, it's Sin City, and she was worried about me. And she told me, God told her, you've done your job, now let me do mine. I didn't run into any of those traps in New York. You would think I would now, wouldn't you? I'd wised up a bit by then. And there are different rooms there. There's a room of being very successful in the corporate world of all places while I'm getting my doctorate. Did slow down getting it, but I was exposed to a way of life that I had never known before. There are different types of temptations that can catch you if you're not careful. Conforming to the world around you. A very high-flying world. A world in which your talents are actually recognized and you go on to do greater and greater things. But you can lose sight a bit of where you really should be going. Have you ever gone into a room that path takes you where you really shouldn't go? I mean, you kind of lose sight of where you are. Being successful is wonderful, but it's not everything. It's not the be-all and the end-all. Let that one sink in for a moment, because I did not recognize the dangers there. And at the same time, I was still trying to figure out who I am. And I realized, maybe I need to go for some counseling, because I've had some pretty ugly things happen to me. I went one time, and I was sure I was going to go back. And I reached a point emotionally, psychologically, where I reached the end of Karen. I totally reached the end of me. And I had a friend who I'd let stay with me until she could find an apartment. And she knew I was supposed to be home, and I wasn't answering the phone. And she, after several hours, she got very concerned. I hadn't taken anything, to kill myself or anything like that. But I just reached the end. I couldn't respond to anyone or anything. I ended up in Bellevue Hospital, and I still couldn't. And they pump your stomach and do all that stuff, and they didn't find that I'd taken anything. But I couldn't respond. So they knew a psychiatrist was in order. Long wait. But then God, amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me, poured through every vein. And I knew I'd be all right. That was God. By the time I saw the psychiatrist, I was okay. And he knew it. And because he knew I was going to go to counseling, he was fine to let me go. Very humiliating experience, but apparently wanted to get my attention. I needed to be calling on God before I called on Karen. We can do that, can't we? I mean, we got it together. My goodness, what do we need? But we need God first. I've always had that hunger for God. And I've always tried to please people at the same time. Those two things don't always go together. I think of David. Saul putting his armor on David, and it didn't fit. It wasn't authentic to him. And he went down to the brook to choose a stone, because that's what he had done when he killed the lion and the bear. He did what was authentic to him. And when he chose a stone, he was looking to the power of God to kill Goliath, and he was just his instrument. I had to find what was authentic to Karen. God knew exactly what I needed and whom I needed. His name was Les Wicks. When I was 34 years old, I met Les at a friend's wedding. We were both in the wedding party. It was an instant love at first sight, they say. Well, I know it's true. Les was totally different than any man I had ever known. He loved me just the way I was. He wasn't trying to change me and make me into something else. He recognized what was authentic in Karen. Les believed I could do anything. He made me do them too. when you have someone who believes in you so much and who will help you with what you need help with, well, what more do you need? God knew what I needed, and God knew that Les needed God more. Because Les grew up in a Christian home, but he became extraordinarily successful. Entrepreneur. Anything Les decided to do, he could do it, pretty much. God was in his life, don't get me wrong. But together, we had to find what God wanted for us. And he used Les to do it. I mean, we had a lot of successful companies. I mean, he had an education company and was helping children after school who were struggling, and a lot of other things we did. In the Philippines, my goodness, the stories I could tell you, but they're not what God wants me to tell you today. See, I have all these notes, but I knew God would tell me what to say. We came to South Carolina because of a documentary called The Corridor of Shame. I don't know if you've heard of it or seen it, but it was about the public school systems along the 95 corridor that were failing students. And Les saw an article about it in the Wall Street Journal. He said, Karen, we have to get that documentary, and we did. And Les decided we were moving to South Carolina because Karen could fix all those problems. I said, Les, you don't know how the education system works. It doesn't work like that. This is a really good room, by the way, because I haven't forgotten about my rooms. Boy, did we have obstacles. Let's see, how many names have I been called that I wouldn't repeat? And real obstacles being put in the way. But World Live Oaks Academy of the Arts and Sciences Charter School is a public school. And our hearts were torn that children, all children, need the tools to be successful, whatever that is. The success has different forms. It's successful to be a mom. It's successful, to be a truck driver. It's successful to start companies, whatever it is. And they weren't getting what they needed. And that school is my mission. God knew what his purpose was for me. All those years of experiencing the good and the bad, all those rooms that I went into, God used all that to help me know how to help others, how to feel God's heart and know his mind for the people that I deal with every day. And it is his work, and I always give him the glory, because it's not because of me or Les. We were just his instruments. I am his instrument. And, I've had my share of pain and grief. Les had 3 children when I married him. They were teenagers. They loved me, I loved them. Our oldest, Leslie, had a cerebral hemorrhage in the prime of his life and died. I was very close to him. He was a musician. So, yeah, we had a lot in common. Our son Scott lives on the other side of Walter Burr, and he and I keep in close touch. And our daughter Lisa is still in New Jersey. And through those children, God has taught me a lot, and I hope maybe he's taught them a few things too. But the children that God has sent me to have not been my own, but yet they are mine because God has given them to me. You never know where God will use you unless you're open to it. And my journey of the last year has not been an easy one. There are a lot of you who have been there in a major way for me. Les and I fell down a flight of stairs, and my right shoulder was crushed into the wall, and were shattered. It's a long recovery. I can do 95% of what I used to be able to do. Les landed on top of me and didn't have any real serious injuries. But when they took me away, I still see him trying to get away from the firemen to get to me. You know, he had Alzheimer's the last 6 or 7 years of his life. It wasn't easy for either one of us. That last year and a half were brutal. If it hadn't been for God and my sisters and so many of you. But I knew that I was going to be okay. That room where God knows how to take grief and use it to minister to other people. That's where I am right now. Started a foundation for the school, Rural Live Oaks Wicks Foundation, to be able to do a lot more for a lot more people. I'm going to be on the board of Erskine College, a whole other group of young people. Young people seems to be where God has placed me. I have a wonderful Sunday school class, and I learned so much from them. A lot of excruciating things, but yet all I really see are blessings. There are blessings in everything if you just look for it. We have to remember who we are. I finally figured out I am who God says I am. It doesn't matter what anyone else says. It took me a long time. I'll be 72 years old in August. I shouldn't have had to wait until the last 10 years or so to figure that out. Just think what I might have been able to do if I had figured it out earlier. The biggest message I have for you, God can restore whatever has been lost in your life. His grace is sufficient. His power is made perfect in weakness.
Thank you. Thank you, Karen, for sharing from your heart today. What a blessing. God's brought you on a great journey, and he's brought you to this place. Thank you for being willing to share and be authentic toward us. We appreciate you so much. And I want to thank you for coming and being part of the service today. Thank you for participating. We will continue next week with our series that we're doing on family relationships called Family Ties. And so we'll pick back up with that next week. But thank you so much for being a part of this. I want to ask us as we close and after we sing this first verse of Amazing Grace, I want, if you will, to speak to each other, but I want you to go out and have a great time with your moms and your grandmothers and with your families, okay? And so let's stand together and just sing that